jin zhong jin de lo na ro dong mar ba me lo jin jin gam bom do som je ja gun jin gar ma ba je je zhong jin jin ba zin nam dong jin dan za zom ba den rom ba zo za lan ja 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 lang an yin be amen rogan nam bo ga ju la so wa de zo ga ju la ma nam jum ba zen no nam dar jin ja lo shen lo gom jin gang ba zon ba shen no ra guan lai ja ren me ba dang zhe de ren de dai zhe be gong jen la nian guo re shen ba me ba jin jie lo me ge gong jin gong wo song ba shen Meng an der goin jem be la ma la jon do zo wan de be gom jen la jemen me ge je wa jen je lo yeng me gom jing a je zong ba shen gang zha ran dong be ngo wo zo ma de ma zhe de ga ra zhong be gom je la am ja lo dong ra war jin je lo nam do ngo wo zhe go song ba shen ji yang ma yin ji liang char wa la ma ga ro ba ra jar we gom je la de yer men dom ba ra jin je lo che wa gon du yon da la ma dong dra me jin je ba la long je jing sa da lam ji yan de ra zo ne do ren je zhang ge go ba nyo ren do. Please ask your questions.
So I'm going to start with the remainder from this morning. Let me find it. Is Atsara practiced in other traditions other than the Barway Dorje lineage?
As far as I know, the only source of this deity is the lineage of Techem Barway Dorje. But it is practiced in various monasteries other than Rocktrol. but it does come from Barway Dorje.
Okay. Going forward, how can we best protect this pure lineage in the absence of our Vajra Barway Dorje?
Well, we protect it by being good people. You know, that's the first thing. I mean, we need to just do our best. And, you know, the things I mentioned at the close of this morning, get along with one another, practice as best we can, and try to stay connected. Staying connected, of course, is important because of the pandemic in particular. That's it. Yeah.
Okay. Can you speak a bit about tertons, why they are so special and so special and unique? Tertons are associated with unconventional personalities and behaviors that do not always fit into the social norms of the times. Why is this an aspect of their manifestation as a terton? And in your long time of knowing Bardo Rinpoche, who is a contemporary terton among us, what qualifies and what qualities and personality of a terton did you see in him?
Well, it is true that many tertons are not monastic. But it is not true that all tertons are not monastic. You know, Samtin Lingpa, or Taksham Nuden Dorje, who's one of whose termas is the biography of Yeshe Tsojo that many people have read, was a monastic and had lots of terma. Also, the Vidyadhara Jatsen Yingpo was a monastic and had 6 volumes of terma. Also, I think Jayun Chenzen Wongpo, whose mind terma was massive, and who also received the lost lineages of all other tertons from Guru Rinpoche, Yeshe Tsojo, and others. He was also monastic, I believe. So it's not true to say that all tertons are always lay people or married or otherwise, you know. Nevertheless, the I've heard this explained in different ways by teachers, but basically it seems that for many male tertons, they require or benefit from the, we would say, spiritual influence or blessing of an incarnation of Yeshe Tsojo. It seems that with female tertons, they may or may not require such a particular blessing, but that's what they say. And what qualities of a terton? Bardo Rinpoche was primarily serving to preserve and spread or share the terma of his predecessor, Terchen Barway Dorje. He did have visions and visionary teachings of many different types at many different times. But I think he primarily regarded himself as an heir or inheritor of the Terma tradition. So it is, strictly speaking, I suppose, valuable to make a distinction between a tertön and the rebirth of a tertön. Nevertheless, many or even most rebirths of tertöns do often eventually find their own terma as well. As far as Barway Rinpoche's qualities as a tertön, you know, I'm not able to see his mind, but I can see two things about him that I think will be what I'll mention. The first is, I think Barway Rinpoche had the greatest devotion to his master, the 16th Jawang Karmapa, that anyone can have. I think that people who knew him well would agree with me on that point. And secondly, in particular, related to the Terma lineage, he had tremendous devotion for Guru Rinpoche, for Guru Padmasambhava, and regarded those two, the 16th Jawang Karmapa and Guru Rinpoche, as inseparable. I think it's the quality of devotion the quality of devotion, I think, that stood out most. Of course, he had countless other qualities, but that's the one that I think answers this particular question best.
All right, the next one. Thank you, Yeshe, for taking my question. Was Barutuku a hidden Mahasiddha? I recall many times in Toronto on seeing Tuku Barutuku just walking around the streets of Toronto and not being noticed. It was amazing that such a high Tuku was so accessible and walking around in Toronto with no advertisements or much known, but must have been staying at Lama Namse Rinpoche's Kajju Gompa in Toronto for staying there. It is rare, as you know, with other schools, with Geshe or other teachers, there is so much hoopla that comes with it. But Barutuku Rinpoche was the common folk and wondering what is the path, what is that path or viewpoint?
I think that one of the things that made Rinpoche unique in this life was that he, for many, many years, served his guru, the Jawang Karmapa, and did not particularly think of himself as special. He knew, of course, whose rebirth he was, and he was trained and practiced, but I think he really looked upon himself as a servant of the 16th Jawang Karmapa, and that gave him the ability to it gave him tremendous humility. So the one-word answer to that question would be his humility. As for his realizations and attainments, a person like me cannot even begin to imagine them, so there's no point in my trying.
Okay, I'm going to go this and then back. So when we say lineage prayer, to this meditator, do the qualities we refer to in the prayer reflect an aspiration we have for ourselves, For me, I certainly do not. So this is Elizabeth Noon, I'm going to have to say, because for me, I certainly do not have the quality of who that has cut all the ties of this life, nor who continuously prays to the Guru, etc. I have also heard that we're referring to the Guru when we say to this meditator, and then to ourselves when we ask for grant your blessings. I vacillate between the two and have for years. Why only the Buddha knows?
It's actually a very good question because in all the years that we've been chanting that lineage supplication, I stumble on the lines that you mentioned in your question. As it says, to the meditator who cuts ties to this life and who is without craving for respect or gain, acquisition. I say, since, as the commentaries that I've been given explain it, that the meditator refers to the person praying. And then I say, well, then this doesn't apply to me because I have not cut my ties to this life. I am not free from craving for honor and gain or respect and acquisition. So I would agree with you that it's an aspiration. Because aspirations are very, very powerful. When we make the aspiration to become better than we are now, sooner or later that is going to happen. It's especially if we dedicate that aspiration to the awakening of all beings. So I would regard it as an aspiration. It is also a concise text of instruction on Mahamudra practice. The central stanzas describe the four elements, or four elements that are significant to the practice of meditation as we understand it. So therefore it is an aspiration, it's also a reminder of why we're doing this. Why am I sitting in this shrine room? Because I want to emulate our Kagyu forefathers. And that means I want to be independent, free from being swayed by or ruled by my attachments. I want to be devoted. I want to be undistracted. And I want to recognize the nature of mind and the nature of thought.
Thank you. Next, Beatrice. So I'm completely overwhelmed by the amount of information. For newcomers and beginners that are interested in Buddhism and the Barway Dorje lineage, what can we do to make all of this more accessible that doesn't confuse them or overwhelm them or turn them off?
Well, one guideline that I attempt to stick to and usually fail is only answer the question that is asked. So in this case, I had to talk about all of these details because I was asked to talk about the lineage of Barway Dorje. And if I were to simply... when people new to Dharma practice encounter especially our extremely high context and very content-full form of Buddhism, I think simply answer the questions that are asked and do so fully without being stingy in your answers. But don't start preaching about things that they haven't asked about. It's very tricky because we put so much emphasis on devotion to the Guru, as we should, because we practice the Vajrayana, and the Vajrayana is centered on and built on that. But as Dzongtse Chense Rinpoche wrote in his recent book, Poison is Medicine, that's actually something that you shouldn't talk about to someone who just walks in, because they're not ready to understand what that means or why you would feel devoted to a guru. Now, there are exceptions. There are people who walk in off the street and have a very overwhelmingly strong karmic propensity. But basically, when someone walks into a Buddhist center in this country, they want to know how to meditate. And if before anyone teaches them how to meditate, a bunch of people swarm all around them and say, we have this deity with this many heads and these deities, and look, some of them are holding skulls and drinking blood, and besides, it's all worship of the Guru. That's not good. Just saying.
Did Rinpoche ever let you know, now this is Lin, did Rinpoche ever let you know directly or indirectly who his Dharma heirs would be?
No.
Okay, and then the next question, I wonder where the translation of the video material from 2019 interviews from Kamatupton has been done. Lama Tratap, who did in situ translation, has said during that time that you would be able to be more clear. Let us know what he was referring, what he was saying to us.
It's in the queue. Haven't gotten to it yet.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm just going back, because there are a few. All right. Given that, this is Catherine, given that realized beings in our lineage have come under attack and experienced obstacles, can you give us advice on how to develop fearlessness in our practice?
Who is Catherine? From Florida?
Catherine Riley.
Oh. Must know the face, but not the name. All right. Fearlessness. First of all, I suspect that almost all great masters have faced, well, I forget what the words were in the question, but opposition and obstacles. Because I think that is simply going to happen. If you're doing something important, there is going to be resistance against it. In other words, if I want to move this table, I'm going to have to deal with the weight of the table. Now, I could just choose not to move the table, which is in fact the choice that I will probably end up making. But if I, for whatever reason, have decided, okay, my mission is to move this table, I have to accept its weight. Now, we can call that the obstacle to moving the table, but it's actually the process of moving the table. Moving a table means picking it up, carrying it around, or if you're smarter, you would find some other way to do that. And because sometimes when I move things, I'm really not, I don't find the smart way to do it, I find the worst way to do it. And anyway, so I think this has always been the case. And And I think if we look at the history of what the Buddha went through, what Guru Rinpoche went through in, especially while he was still in the South Asia, and even when he went to Tibet, and what, Talopa, Naropa, Marpa, Milarepa, Gampopa, and every Karmapa have gone through, they've all gone through, faced some kind of opposition because they're doing something tremendous. So I think fearlessness would have to come from the recognition that the opposition is sometimes a sign of the significance of the deeds or endeavor.
By the way, that's James Riley. This was just his sister's account.
Oh, okay.
And now we know
Correct.
James, yeah.
Okay.
And that's all I have so far. Anyone here?
Considering the specific moment where we are now, here, I was starting to think, and I know there were teachings taught first in Tibet and then in India, in preparation or amelioration, if I can use that word, to the disasters that were brought on by the invasion of the Chinese. I say that because we're apparently at the edge of possible wars. And how, what kind of teachings were put out at that time that might help us now?
Many of the terma concealed by Guru Rinpoche and Yeshe Tsogyal and discovered in later centuries contain prophecies of future events and what is needed to respond to them and help people. The prophecies serve two functions. One is to, I suppose, warn people of potential problems or dangers. And the other is to identify for the Tirtan the time at which it is appropriate for them to reveal the treasure they have discovered. It is not the case usually that a Tirtan will find a terma and then immediately start teaching it. In many cases, whether it is a physical discovery of what we call earth treasure, earth terma, or whether it is a mind terma, which appears in their mind through their aspirations and Guru Rinpoche's blessing, in either case, they may hold on to it and keep it secret for many years until a time that will often be signaled. And you can read about this, like in the longest of the canonical biographies of Guru Rinpoche, there's a prediction of 100 different Tirtans. And then also in the book, The 100 Tirtans by Jungön Lodro Tai, Jungön Kongtrul the Great, in the case of those 100, because he talks about more than 200 Tirtans in that book, but in the case of those 100, he starts with the prediction, the stanza from the, it's usually called the Testament of Padma or the Annals of Padma in most, anyway, the Pema Katang. He'll give you that. So, so there is a belief that these teachings are found at the right time to deal with what is happening at that time. So if the time for which they are remedies has not yet occurred, the Teten will keep them secret until the actual events transpire. You know, it could be changes in the environment, it could be other seemingly random events, but that are nevertheless predicted. So, as the environment, as climate change, and all of the other problems caused by climate change, and as well as you mentioned, socio-political conflicts, as these become worse, there will be responses, ways to help. But whoever the Tetons are who will discover them, they've probably already discovered them, they will only let us know about them when it's time. That's it, and this is how it's supposed to work.
I think the answer is yes, but are both of these texts concerning the 100 plus Tetons available in English?
Yes. The first one was initially translated by, I think it was a judge named Jacques Bacot into French at the turn of the 20th century, and then was translated from the French by, I believe, a woman named Gwendolyn Baines or Gwendolyn Bays, under the guidance of Totong Tulku Rinpoche, and I'm sure we have a copy of it in the English language library. I think it's called The Life and Liberation of Padmasambhava in their translation. The actual term Pema Katang, Katang is a type of early Tibetan literature that includes, it's kind of like the annals, the account of a certain time. And so there were five, and these ones were all discovered by the Tetun Ujin Lingpa. Anyway, it's called the Pema Katang, so the Annals or Testament of Padma. And then the other one, of course it has a fancy name like Garland of Beryls or Garland of Lapis Lazuli. I forget. I keep on going back and forth between beryl and lapis lazuli for Vaidurya because it refers to beryl, but yes and no. Anyway, that's a whole other issue. So I think we just call it the 100 Tetuns, and that's available. It was published by KTD, and I'm sure we've got a copy here. People can read.
And Linda Lee is saying the 100 Tetons by Jamgon Kongtrul Lodrataya?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yep. We have a question up here. You could meet her. Sorry.
It's easier.
I was wondering if there is any more that's known about Terchen Barway Dorje's meeting with the 14th Karmapa and the receiving of, the prophecy that he would be a Terchen. I know just that basic fact. The Guru Yoga, the short practice that we do, has always been very moving, but I don't know more of the story.
I don't remember the circumstances under which they were in the same place at the same time. It is probably, you can find a brief description of those circumstances in the Precious Essence. But what happened was that the 14th Joan Karmapa, like many Karmapas, was a Terten who didn't want to, he didn't want to divert his activity just into that, because he had to be the Karmapa. And which, we regard as a completely unique person and job, both. You only get one per planet, Karmapa. There's supposed to be one in each of the billion worlds which currently have Buddha Shakyamuni's teachings. But in terms of this planet, we have one. He has other emanations, he said, while he was teaching at KTD, but basically we have one Karmapa, And so the 14th Karmapa, I think they all have these kinds of visionary teachings. And in Tulku Urgyen Rinpoche's memoir, he talks about books of Terma simply floating into the space in front of the 15th Karmapa. So, and the 16th Karmapa had a famous vision of Vimalamitra that was very similar to the 3rd Karmapa's vision of Vimalamitra that gave rise to the Karmanyingtik branch of the Bhimanyingtik. So I think it's pretty safe to assume that all Karmapas, or whether they want it to be known or not, are Tertuns. So the 14th Karmapa dictated the terma of the sadhana of all victorious Sugatas to Tetshin Barway Dorje. And it was in the context of that meeting that he said to Barway Dorje, you are going to be a Tertun also. And what Barway Dorje writes about is he says he did not allow me or consent to using the terma sign, you know, the 2 dots with the moon between. So he didn't want to be too upfront about it being terma, but it was a mind terma. And the cycle itself, most of it is apparently lost, was much longer than that short daily. That's a daily practice. Obviously there's an empowerment, and the whole mandala seems to include, it may include all 25 disciples and lots of other, I don't know. We have a few pages of it, but I don't think we have the whole thing. So that was the occasion when he was serving as the treasure scribe, when the Tekchok Dorje, the 14th Jawan Karmapa, dictated to him his treasure, which is the source of that practice.
Thank you. I don't believe that there's ever been a teaching on the Junchair even.
Barda Rinpoche did teach it one day. He taught it. But
is that recorded or transcribed?
it must be, I'm sure. I don't know if it was ever transcribed.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, would you be willing to speak of the relationship between Tertun Barway Dorje and his guru Chokya Lingpa?
I believe the relationship began with the fact that Barway Dorje's sister, I think her name was Dechin Chudran, but I could have that wrong, anyway, was the predicted consort and eventually wife of Chokcha Dechin Lingpa. And so it was Barway Dorje who brought her to him, to where he was residing or staying at the time. And it seems that either immediately upon that or soon thereafter, they became fairly inseparable. Tertun Barway Dorje, and at this time, you know, he wasn't yet openly a Tertun, was Chokcha Lingpa's attendant, and he also was the supervisor of the building of both of Chokcha Lingpa's monastery, Tsike Norbosumdo and Netin monastery. So he served Chokcha Lingpa pretty well hand and foot until Chokcha Lingpa passed away in 1871. Okay. Let's see what time it is. People are afraid to move, that I'll think they have a question. It's like if you're in an auction and you go like this and they say, "Did you sold?" Oh, it's only 2:39. Good.
Thank you, Lama. My question is, I'm always thinking in terms of kalpas. I don't know why. So I'm thinking that this is the very beginning of the kalpa, and these teachings obviously come from far, far, far longer, far in the past. So can you talk about that a little bit, about how teachings go from kalpa to kalpa?
Mhm.
Because Buddha Shakyamuni must have, he didn't reach enlightenment in this kalpa, probably. He probably has reached enlightenment in every kalpa in the last, millions of kalpas, and he's one of those souls that just keeps coming back and coming back and coming back. So if you could just touch on that a little bit, how these teachings get carried from kalpa to kalpa. And I always wonder if a kalpa really, that's beyond our comprehension. And when you're thinking of a universe dying, is it really an entire universe, or is it just part of a universe and there's something that's still there and then it just kind of spreads back into the universe eventually? Thank you.
Actually, the long answer to your question, which will be short for me to say, is you should read the Bhadrakalpa Sutra, the sutra on this good kalpa, which I know is in the English language library. I think it's about 2 books. They're about this thick. Oh, okay. Yeah, or Bhadrakalpa Sutra. I don't know, how it was translated. So that's the long answer. And now for the short answer, which will be long. The term kalpa needs to be distinguished from other words like yug, like Kali Yuga and so on. It's more than a historical period. It's often explained as the duration of, and it's hard to know whether it simply means a billion world system, which would be not something like our understanding of a galaxy, or whether it can be more local or more widespread than that. Again, there are 3 types of kalpas. There is a great kalpa, an intermediate kalpa, and a lesser kalpa. And great kalpas are made up of lots of the lesser ones. You can read about the rising age and all that and so on. And it's hard to know, for one thing, it's hard to understand how to square this with our scientific beliefs or prejudices or whatever we have. So I find this fascinating, but I leave a lot of this in an area of I just don't know. Now, when you talk about Buddha Shakyamuni's awakening, now we are in a thicket of thorns. He's not, but we are. Because there are at least 4 different understandings among traditional Buddhists who practiced what we call different vehicles about how that happened. According to at least some scriptures of the common vehicle, the common tradition, the Buddha Shakyamuni passed through the entire spiritual path, starting from the path of accumulation, on the night and dawn of his awakening. That he was, at least in Jamlo Drita's summary of it, that he was an ordinary person. Most Mahayana sutras say that he gathered the accumulations of merit and wisdom, starting with his first generation of bodhicitta, culminating with his awakening, over a period of 3 innumerable kalpas. Now, innumerable, in spite of its name, is a number. It's 10 to the power of 60. So if a kalpa is the duration of a galaxy, then, it takes 10 to the power of 60 kalpas to achieve the first bodhisattva level, then 10 to the power of 60 to achieve the 8th bodhisattva level, and then 10 to the power of 60 to become Buddha. That's what some of the sutras, Mahayana sutras, say. And only because he was especially quick. Most of them, they say it takes 33 or something. For example, if you study the 8 bodhisattvas, Maitreya, who will be the next Buddha, should have achieved Buddhahood, or could have achieved Buddhahood first, before Shakyamuni. But he chose a path of a slightly, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but, it's not easy is the wrong word, but a more serene path. So that meant that he became the next one, or will be the next one. Now, other Mahayana sutras and almost all Vajrayana tantras will say that the Buddha, whether he achieved awakening at that time or not, did not achieve it here. That he demonstrated the achievement of awakening here. In many of the tantras, it's said that he left his body, went to Akanishta, where he received empowerment from all previous Buddhas, and then returned to his body. Other tantras phrase it differently. Many times they'll say that he had previously achieved awakening in Akanishta, and then took birth in order to demonstrate the path. So most Mahayanists, at least of our flavor, and Vajrayanists would say what you said, that he had achieved Buddhahood countless aeons ago, but was demonstrating or dramatizing the achievement of it. Now, then there is a particular outlook on the Buddha's awakening, how it happened, why he demonstrated the way he did, and so on, that is unique to Dzogchen. And I don't want to get into that because I think it's just too much information. But so basically, some Buddhists believe that the Buddha achieved awakening in that life. Some Buddhists believe that he achieved awakening a long time before. And then they vary with exactly what they envisage as the means of awakening. Now the question of, is this Buddha Shakyamuni, the same person as the previous Buddhas? Or is each one a different Buddha? Most teachers say that each one is a different Buddha. And that, for example, Jungul Udritai in the Treasury of Knowledge talks about this. He says, when the Buddha says, when I was the Buddha so-and-so, countless kalpas ago, he says what he means is that Buddha had the same level of realization, the same activity as me. Other teachers in other contexts will say, no, it's literally true. It's really the same Buddha. And then we get into the question of basis of emanation and emanation. And that gets complicated simply because we're talking about things that we can't handle. Our minds don't go there. Because in our type of consciousness, everything is either or, right? The law of the excluded middle. So, the danger is by overly conceptualizing these things, we can delay, not significantly, but in a minor way, our true appreciation of what Buddhahood must be. So that's all I can say.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I'll do this and then I'll go back to the email one. So this is Peter Elias. On as practical level as possible, how do you personally work with your own mind to see others as enlightened deities?
I think it's a very gradual process, and there are steps to it. The first step is to recognize that everything you see and so forth is like a magical illusion. Because as long as we sustain the habit of seeing things as independently real, we'll be constantly trying to negotiate between apparent paradoxes or contradictions. So, for example, if I think that things are real, and I know that so-and-so has a bad temper, do I see them as a bad-tempered deity? Or do I tell myself their bad temper isn't really their bad temper? You know, I mean, you have to create some room, some space. And the space starts with questioning reality. You know, questioning the independent reality of our projections. If you do that, and you also have a strong deity practice, then I've heard, the presence of the deity starts to infiltrate your perception. But exactly what that means, how that happens, how long it takes, are beyond me.
Okay, Nick, can you explain the nature of the ear-whispered transmission of guru to chief student and its importance to the continuity of the lineage? This is Steve Wynn.
Okay. There are a couple of different things that get jumbled together, and not unreasonably so, because they are related. The term that is often translated ear-whispered lineage is Nianju, which means heard, or you could say eared, something that you hear with your ears, lineage. And it can refer to oral instructions that are not written down, that are given to one disciple. But it can also refer to oral instructions that are given to several or even many disciples. And nowadays we use the term Nianju, such as the Reichung Nianju, the ear-whispered lineage of Reichungpa, Sormang Nianju, that of Sormang, Ngenzong, the Ngenzong Repa, Milarepa's disciple, and the Dokpo. They'll have Nianju. So there are texts, there are empowerments, there are texts of instruction, and so on. And we still call it the Nianju, or the ear-whispered lineage, because it's, I guess, very special would be the best. So that's one thing, that's Nianju. And then there's Chigju. Chigju means a single lineage where teachings are only given to one person. So there are many teachings in every lineage that are given only to a one or probably a few disciples. And those are normally called unitary or single lineage, Chigju. So there are, and then below Chigju, then there's Kaja or Kajama, which means command seal. And command seal can mean different things, but basically it means an empowerment or teaching that is not given to the public. When these great collections are given, there are parts that are only given, let's say, to tulkus or to other lineage holders. And so those are what are called, command sealed. And then, so when we talk about the ear whisper teachings and so on, it can be a little confusing which of these we're talking about. But basically, a lineage is transmitted through the transference of blessings, transference of wisdom. So, for example, although Jomgulu Durtai went on to receive many teachings and became a holder of the Karma Kaju and Nyingma traditions, and many others, Kalachakra, Shangpa, but he received the lineage, according to him, when the ninth Situ quoted to him a certain prayer by Guru Rinpoche that is, describing how to work with what you see, hear, and think. And this prayer is commonly available. It's not a secret prayer. But the Pema Nyingya Wompo, the ninth Situ Rinpoche, knew that at that moment, when he said those words to Jomgulu Durtai, it would cause his wisdom, his blessings to transfer to him. So the ear-whispered lineage, the lineage that is beyond conventional modes of transmission, may be something that you could be in the room, and one teacher passes it on to another, and it might not mean anything to you. You might not notice it, but obviously it's essential, for real transmission to occur and be a living tradition. There has to be what in the Kaju tradition we typically call the blessing which transfers wisdom. And in the Nyingma tradition is sometimes, often called the ultimate empowerment of awareness display.
Lin, can you tell us anything Rinpoche shared about his hopes for the Sangha?
Well, I can only speak of what he said to me, and he was optimistic about the future of this community. I think he has, however, great respect, love, and affection for all of his students and even those participants who may not even think of themselves as students. It all comes down to a kind of warmth. Rinpoche, every word of Dharma that came out of his mouth was warm. The affect was warmth, affection. You can think of it as paternal affection or however you want, but so I feel that he had no doubt whatsoever that things will go on and progress further. You know, we know he's coming back sooner or later. And, you know, things will progress. That's the feeling I got from him. That's really the best answer I can give to that question.
So again, Peter Elias, perhaps I missed it this morning, but you mentioned an intimate connection between Barway Dorje's lineage and that of Rangchungpa's. Can you please elaborate?
Well, the main source of the Nyenju teachings of the Karma Kaju, you can think of it as Karma Kaju or Sermong Kaju, is Sermong Monastery. And these include the three Nyenjus that come from three of Milarepa's disciples. One was Lord Gampopa, and that's called the Dakpo Nyenju. This is not the same as the general teachings that, you know. And then there was Ngenzong Repa, so the Ngenzong Nyenju, and Rechungpa. Of these three, Rechungpa's is the best known. And we find peripheral literature, obviously not the secret teachings themselves, I hope, but peripheral literature of it, such as the biographies of Milarepa and Marpa by Sangyun Heruka. He was a holder of the Rechu Nyenju, an emanation of Rechungpa. And so the most common edition of the 100,000 songs of Milarepa also makes a great deal of reference to the Nyenju, because it also came out of that group, Sangyun Heruka, and I guess his disciples or masters. And if you want to know more about that, then I think you should read Dr. Andy Quintman's books about Milarepa, because he's investigated this. He knows whatever there is to know about that, he knows it. So the connection is that since the Sermong Monastery was among monasteries, the main repository of the Nyenju, the Rechu Nyenju especially, and the Terchen Barway Dorje was a Sermong Tulku. He was actually he was the Chetsong Tulku, Chetsong Rinpoche, but also the brother of the Sermong Tenzin Tulku of that time. So obviously he was trained in this, and that's one thing. And then the other thing is that I've never studied the Sermong Nyenju, but according to Lama Trotop, the Baram Kaju teachings of the three wish-fulfilling jewels are very similar to the Sermong Nyenju.
I don't have any more.
Any other questions? Okay. Well, thank you all very much. I hope that I've said at least something that was of use to you. And we'll conclude with the dedication. Starting again on page 7. Sunam de ye dam je zemba nye dam ne nye be ra nam bam je ne jenga na je ba la drum ba ye Simben zole ro wa jo. Gewan de ye je wo gun. Sunam ye je zon zo de. Sunam ye je le jong we. Angonyen dombajo, Jonjo zemne remboje, Maje banham je joje, Jamba nyamba me badong, Gonne gondo balbajo, Semjen damje de don den joje, Ngendro damje dando dom pajo, Changzho zamba ganda zajomba, Deda guanje man drombajo, Sangje ringje zin zin dam pegar, Jel gun du shao du ling pai, Zamje me jong de bu song hai je, Si je jong da cha be da shi.